Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. So welcome to this week of BizTechTalk. I'm Dan Stewart, and I'm here with
Kit Letcher.
I caught you on that one.
I know
So
your face. You're like, do you know your name?
hello, hello. So we're going to talk this week about data, right? Data for small, medium, any size business. Data is really important. It's really what you need to drive your business forward. So we're going to be talking about from both aspects, from the business aspect as well as the technology aspect. But as you know me, Kit, I like to start with the business side. So
Okay.
what is the business angle on this? I know you had some really good stories behind this. So Kit, why don't you kick it off? Talk about your business angle on data and using
Okay.
it in your business.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Well, when we originally came up with this idea of talking about data, I was like, it's such a big topic. Like, how do we narrow that down into tangible bites that people can actually use? And as I was thinking about it, what I love and hate about data is you can take it in any direction that you want to. And so we have worked really hard over the years to come up with different metrics and things that we need to keep in mind and, really keep in front of us to be successful. But for like my BBB versus another one, that may be completely different based on our skill sets, based on our location, based on the services that we offer to our businesses. And I think that's true for most people. One construction company versus another, what they're tracking could be vastly different. And so you have to really figure out like what's your end game? What are the things that you really need to move your business forward? And for us, I have a coach who told me that when you want to track your data and you want a good picture of what's happening in your business, you really need to create a list. Like, let's pretend you're on a desert island. Nobody's coming to you. You get a bottle thrown in the ocean of a spreadsheet basically that arrives once a week. What data is on that spreadsheet that tells you your business is going in the right direction? You're moving forward, things are happening, orders are getting filled or services are being provided. And at the end of the day or at the end of the week that I have money in the bank, my people are still working, and my customers are happy, and we are still in business and in business well. So what do those trends look like? And so he really challenged us to come up with 10 to 15 things. It was hard because we have a lot of things that
Yeah.
we want to track. But we came up with a list that we've actually tweaked over the last several years of things that we look at. And sometimes it's cash in the bank, retention numbers. How many businesses do we have that are accredited? How many new leads are coming through that we're talking to? How many people are coming to our events and utilizing the resources from the program staff that we have? And so those have changed over the years. But what I think is interesting about it, like, that's relevant to me. Relevant to your business or to another business could be something really different. Maybe you're a strictly online business. And so what you need to track is more your marketing numbers, your click numbers on your website or your social media pages, your engagement. And that could be top of the funnel for you as far as priorities. So when we talk about data, well, it's big.
Yeah.
I think there's so
Yes.
many ways in which we could use it.
Oh, absolutely. And that is the hardest part. So as I work with companies trying to get their, what I call data activation, they're trying to get started because they have all this data and they're trying to figure out what to do. That is the hardest thing because you have millions of pieces of information.
Right.
What are you going to track? And that can change depending on what you're dealing with in your business, but you got to know, what is it? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What are you trying to track? And that can change. Also, you can get in a trap where you're tracking things that may be good to know, but not critical to advancing your business. So you may want to know, our customer complaints up today. Do we fill the orders we needed to fill today? That's all the heart rate of the company, right? You need to know that. But what do you need to measure to move you closer to fulfilling your mission as an organization? And that can get more complicated, but you need to know that. You need to be able to know what outcomes you're after. So if you're after a revenue increase over the next year and a half, or you're after a retention rate, customer retention rate of a certain peak at a certain time, you need to start putting together the data to be able to track that. And
Yeah.
that is complicated to identify that.
It can be, yeah. And so when you're looking for data and you're working with businesses, then like where have you found a good place, like a starting point for them?
Yeah, like you said, you can come up with a bunch of different
Yeah.
pieces of information to track, and you can come up with your KPIs. But I would pick your one or two critical top of mind issues that you're confronted with. Whatever that is, if it's sales, if it's lead generation, if it's click throughs, whatever that is, get that and get a number that you want to hit. What is the end result? You want to increase that by 10%. And that would make it something achievable, but something that's really specific. And then I would go after that number. But the trick is, as you measure that, you have to keep measuring it over time. So what you do is you go, we have a problem, we have to hit this. We're going to measure it. You measure that rate, whatever it is, you get that number. They say, what can we adjust? What can we change to increase that number? And I wouldn't go through a whole lot of changes. Pick one or two things you're going to tweak in your process or your marketing or whatever it is, make that change, and then start measuring. Did that have an impact?
Yeah.
Because if you throw too many things at it, you're not going to know what the thing is. So we talked about this before, that you can do some really pretty dashboards, right? Some really cool looking reports.
Yeah. There's some
What are you
amazing
going to do
software
with
out
it?
there.
Yeah, how are you going to apply it? Right. So you got to figure out something where you can tweak it and measure over time and see if those adjustments are making a difference. So you're using the data versus what I do with a lot of clients is that they're just after the data and the reports, but they're not thinking about what are they going to do with it? What change are you going to bring about based on the information you're getting back? And then how are you going to remeasure to see if that's having an impact?
Yeah. And I think your comment about like testing is so interesting because tests don't have to be long. They can be really short. We've done social media campaigns where we've put like two different graphics basically out at the same time with the same copy and to see which graphic is more appealing. And then 2 weeks later, made changes off that. So you can have really quick turn testing, I would say, that's tangible that you're moving on all the time to really hone down that message. But then you have to look for those long-term trends. And I think that's one of the really interesting things when you are tracking your data and keeping it in such a way that you can refer back to like historical trends, whether that's 6 months or 18 months. And one of the things that we learned whenever we changed a few processes is that we didn't see a change for a certain process until 18 months later. When businesses were renewing and it got past a certain point, we had a staff change and we missed doing like certain steps. And it absolutely affected how people renewed their accreditation, the services they thought we provided, their engagement with BBB. And it was just, for us, it was a minor change. And it truly was like, we just had a vacant position for a bit, but we saw it really, really clearly. And we could track it back to that staff change and figure out, okay, this is one we have to keep because now we know what happens if we don't do it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And I think companies, that's one thing they get into is they try to pivot too quickly before they get a good solid trend because they don't know yet. And you got to give time, you got to gather enough data to be able to understand if that's really having an impact or was it just an anomaly or based on other factors, right? So yeah, you got to give it time to curate. And that doesn't always have to be 18 months, right? Sometimes it can be a few weeks, but you know your business, you know for this one thing, how long it will take to really gather enough information to see if you're actually on the right track. And that's something that companies are getting better at, but it's amazing. Even large companies I deal with are still struggling with that piece of information. And I like to use when your comment about on the marketing side, it's kind of funny that the first to emerge of getting it, the testing, were the marketing folks with their A/B testing, right? Putting two things out there and seeing which one worked better. So they're really the first ones to gravitate towards this idea of using data to test and then coming back and making adjustments. So kudos to the marketing people to get it before it seemed like anybody else did. But I see that a lot. I see marketing people really advancing on data analytics faster than other areas in organizations. So that might be something you look into. What's your
Yeah.
marketing department? See if you can take some of that and apply it to different parts of your organization.
Well, and I wonder, that's a great point. I wonder if that has to do with the fact that our marketing budget feels like the one that's oftentimes the most expendable. And
Mm,
so, like, if we're losing money in another area, we could take it from marketing. And so they're constantly having to justify their ROI. Like, if we spend this much in marketing, here's how many leads I can drive to this business, or
mhm.
here's how much exposure I'm getting you. And so it's really like built into their processes. I think you make a great point there.
Yeah.
And they're always having to justify that. So what if we did that level of justification for processes or procedures or operations or even our sales department, like as far as like turnover for employee retention?
Yeah. And, you mentioned sales and embedding data analytics in the sales process.
Mhm.
That is something where you could translate it more readily, I think, from marketing into sales if you go
Yeah.
make that first movement. Because what I see a lot is that they have a sales dashboard in the office, and it's where they're trending to the month. Well, this
Mhm.
month we didn't make our quota. Well, what happened in week 1 of the month that caused you, are you
To
tracking
get
stats
there. Yeah.
daily?
Mhm.
And it looks like, man, we're falling off. The last few days we fell off. Why? Why did we fall off? And to get those indicators in there, to know that, hey, if we don't hit this indicator at this point in the month, there's no way we're going to make our end of month numbers. And so
Yeah.
you just along the way, instead of waiting until the end, it's too late.
Mhm.
By the time you get that number, it's already happened.
Right.
So you got to be able to forecast continuously throughout the process and make adjustments as you go to line up to make sure you hit
Mhm.
the numbers at the end, are just to validate, did you make the right adjustments earlier on?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something. So each like sales process for most businesses is different. They're all kind of the same idea, but how
Yeah.
they go about executing that, it looks different. And I think what I find most overwhelming about collecting data is like, what's the receptacle that's going to hold that?
Mhm.
And I think when I talk to business owners that are, especially with small businesses, that feels really overwhelming. Like, I don't have extra people to like man spreadsheets and put in all this stuff. And quite frankly, whenever we are testing our data for our sales team, we do tally marks on a paper. And
Oh, really?
really rudimentary, but it matters. And so when we want to test like how many phone calls you do during the day, maybe it's like a 2-week period, we have everybody do the tally mark. So it's number of phone calls, number of people that hung up on you, number of people that answered, number of like actual conversations you were able to have, number of deals that you closed. And so that it benchmarks that point in time. Has this changed? And do we need to do any other evaluation? And so we don't track it all the time, but we know
Mhm.
like if somebody's falling off and maybe their sales numbers aren't as high or they're having some inconsistencies with hitting their goals, let's go back and look. What
Yes.
do your call volume look like? What does your conversation look like? And that we know what our baseline is that's really successful for our organization. Whereas another BBB, that's going to look different because they sell differently than we do. And the tone is different. I mean, all good things, but it has to match your organization and your culture and your values.
Yep, absolutely. That's why knowing your business and how that works and the culture of your business is really important to what you gather and how you track it, and then how you bring that change to your employees,
Mhm.
right? And so that's really important because it's what they call organizational change management, right? So it's making sure that you're taking that data and you see, talking about sales again. I don't mean to be hammering on sales a lot, but salespeople can be really resistant to putting things into CRM, to tracking
Mhm.
that data, to be held to the number, right? Oh, did you make these many calls? Um, but that comes out to, they have to see the value in it,
Right.
right? And it has to fit in with your culture. If you're just hitting a number and they're
Yeah.
not having time to build relationships, they're not going to want to track the number, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not reflective of how they do their business. So there's a gap between how they see the business running and how you see it. you have to close those gaps. You have to be all on the same page culturally before you
Mhm.
can start measuring people against these statistics. It has to make sense to them. It has to fit in with how they think they need to do their job. If you don't have that alignment, people aren't going to want to be measured by it or
Right.
capture that information.
It doesn't
And
matter what your number is.
yeah, and I love it that you were doing it manually, because a lot of times I won't always recommend investment in technology. Work out the process first,
Mhm.
work out the numbers first, gather what you can in the easiest way possible first, and see how that works out. And then worry about the technical tool, because there are tools that'll do that, right?
Mhm.
Phone systems that'll do that. I mean, you can
Yeah.
apply all sorts of tools, but you don't want to head down a path where you get something, it's not the right tool.
Mhm.
But once you get to that point, I would evaluate the current tools they have, because now most software packages have some sort of built-in analytics layer. From Salesforce down to Sugar CRM to some of the free CRM tools that you can get out there, to I saw a free financial package that is pretty robust
Mhm.
for free, called Wave Apps, I think. And it's free, but it has some really good reporting analytics on top of it. So I would look at the tools you currently have and see what the analytics capabilities are there before I would run out and buy like Power BI or a Tableau tool. See what you get with what you have. And then you mentioned Excel. Problem with Excel is that's usually somebody's individual spreadsheet.
Right.
So I would take an Excel and at least make it a shareable document
Mhm.
and organize and control the cells and have people as a group put information into it. Those are really simple, straightforward ways. But the idea is capture, figure out what it is you're capturing and why, then just figure out a way to capture it. And then you can always feed it into something else later on.
Right.
But I wouldn't get hung up on the tools early on. I figure out your process and what you're capturing and what your outcomes are
Yeah.
first.
And you're exactly right, because we used paper for years and to do like that specific tracking on a pretty regular basis. We'd do like 2 week chunks. And then this last phone system that we just moved to, that was one of the requirements. We said it has to be able to show us these things, because these are the things that are really important to us. And this is how we follow our success. And
Perfect.
so until we found something that did it, then we just kept hunting. And so, yeah, it gave us the tools we needed to know, like, this is the right software for us.
Because what would happen, I see this a lot, you would have been in that room trying to define your requirements,
Mhm.
and you'd be guessing. You wouldn't be
Oh,
quite
yeah.
sure what you want. Whenever I run into a client where when we talk about requirements for a certain solution and they're not quite sure what they want, it's back to those fundamentals.
Mhm.
They don't know what they're after. They don't know what outcomes they want. They don't know the problem they're trying to solve. But once you know that and you're doing it manually, then you know exactly what to ask for out of a vendor for a
Yeah.
software product. So that's perfect. And that you have your requirements already built because
Yeah,
you've been through it. You know exactly what you want to
absolutely.
buy.
Well, and the other thing I like about that is then it gives you an opportunity to tell somebody else or pick their brain, like, here's the problem I'm solving, like, here's what I need it to do. And so maybe there's a different way for you to solve that problem that they have the knowledge of. And so that's one of the things I've been so appreciative of in this position. I get to talk about different business issues and talk to different business owners. And when I say, like, we're tracking this, they're like, oh, we track something similar, but we do it this way. It's eye opening, because it's like, that had never occurred to me. I don't have that experience that you've had or in that area. And so it just lends itself to really creating more tools, more strategy, but also creating more relationships with those other business owners, which has been really neat.
Yeah, that's great. And we've talked about that before. And I think building your data set, uh,
Mhm.
internal data for sure, but you can go outside, right? And talk to other people in your industry and find out what their baselines are and start measuring against those
Mhm.
and see where you fall and see how you differ and see how you're the same. And you can collect, in this day and age, all sorts of data sources. You can just grab free data. If you have, if you're in an industry that has some sort of group that does that, some uh, sort of group, you can, like, even Chamber of Commerce,
Mhm.
right? Hey, they have a good data set that you can get if you're a member. So there are different sources you can bring in that you can use to do analytics. But the other part that we talked about is where to put it.
Right.
Right. So where do you put that data? And so the idea of finding a tool is great, but if you have a CRM, use that as your data repository.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you can add fields to it. You can do a little edit and you can add a field to it. Maybe you don't need that field to do the process, but you could use, it'd be easy to capture that piece of information solely for doing reports on it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you can capture it just so you can trend it and monitor it over time, see how it's going. So a lot of people think that every field on the screen has to be part of the process. You can add a field because if they're on the phone, capture that piece of information right then and there, and now we'll have it. We can measure against it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the next step is obviously just figuring out, okay, I've got all these numbers. Now what? What do I do with them? And how do I use those numbers to tweak the process to do something better? And just figuring out what better looks like. And so maybe the number you have is the best number and you've reached the pinnacle of like efficiency and potential in that one area. And so your goal is to maintain, not change anything. But maybe there's another area where you really need to, build up support for that, and just figuring out like, how do you do that? How do you improve that process? Or how do you bring somebody else in to watch that and grow it and figure out like, what's the next step for us? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with just strategy. You need to have a strategy of what's my end goal in mind, and is actually adding another process, adding a procedure, tracking this number important to getting to that goal.
Yes. Yep. And again, that KPIs are great to have KPIs for a business, but it's really choosing those KPIs that are moving your business forward in the direction you need it to go, right? Could be to address the challenge or to just advance the business overall, but you need to be careful on what you are correcting against, right? To make sure you have some baseline to know if that's a good enough number, or if that's an area where you really want to spend time and money to improve it, because you might not want to. You might say that's good enough because we have more issues over here that are costing us more, that we need to move our focus over in this part of the organization.
Yeah. Well, and changing that metric by 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever it is, isn't truly going to change our needle as far as like our business growth or scale or whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly right.
Honest there.
Yeah.
So just in wrapping up today, then I think we wanted to touch on some of our big takeaways for everybody, those tangible bites. If you wanted to recap the things that people needed to be aware of, and then also keep in mind as they're looking at their data, thinking about a data plan, a strategy for their business, what are those 1 to 3 big takeaways that we want them to know?
Yeah, I would like to talk about, I would definitely decide on what data you're going to measure against. What are those key few, I like your short list, start small, few KPIs that you want to take on and really measure against that. Then figure out, do you have the data, or are you capturing the data to be able to measure that? And then make sure you do that iteratively. That consistent measurement and improvement as you adjust to make sure that you're making the changes you need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one other thing that we wanted to touch on just is that people need to really curate their options for data from outside sources. Like, it doesn't all have to be internal. You can find really great data from looking at trade publications or journals, or reaching out to maybe your chamber or looking at other industries, so that you have something to compare against. And it's not just, we're in this silo and looking through a very focused lens. We're looking much broader and saying, like, what are other people collecting and what's relevant to our economy as a whole?
Yeah. And then my final piece would be to put technology off a bit. Get all that figured out before you worry about the technology.
Which is ironic.
Yeah. And then look at technology that you currently have and see if you can leverage that to capture it. And then you want to be able to organize your data, obviously, get it in the right, fields and name it correctly and all that kind of just housekeeping of your data. But don't run out first and buy a tool or a data tool. Get your house in order first.
Yeah. I love that. I think you're spot on.
Great. Great. Well, hopefully that was helpful. We will post this and you'll be able to listen to this at your will. But Kit, again, really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Dan. I always love talking to you.
Okay, take care. We'll see you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye. And cut.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so that was